Mr. Crowder, I think you had a question from the back.
Yes, I just wanted to add something to the question about localized supply, because that's so different from the issue of whether or not there's storage on board to go back into the grid. Because even if it's not in the scope of this study, one of the most interesting things happening now is the defense national security interests concern that we should be stimulating more, they're not focused on neighborhood level, but more local generation of renewables and other sources, and reinforcing the integrity of distribution networks as distinct from making one place of Saudi Arabia of sun, someplace else of Saudi Arabia of wind, and then investing in a lot of long-distance transmission. So there are a number of people working on this concept of let's look at how we reinforce local generation, including generation of renewables, that is consistent but at a slightly larger scale than the kind of neighborhood generation that you were talking about. But there is a consistency there that's worth exploring, I think.
Hello, Ben Wadilla from Popular Mechanics. Given that this is the electrical sort of discussion, there's been a lot of talk of storage and in specific the lithium chemistry-based battery. Conspicuously absent has been any discussion of high performance capacitance storage. I know there's been a lot of work done in that region. Has that been part of your considerations at any level as far as these studies are concerned?
You can't both look at me. Why? That must mean it's still in a laboratory state.
Yeah. I'll answer from the NPC studies. The NPC study scope is to really consider what would be commercially available by 2050. That means in the hands of the consumer. Things that we consider to be beyond that, we will address and discuss in the study, but we're really trying to expand the understanding around commercially available. So we deal with those kinds of issues that we think may not be ready by 2050 in white papers or side documents, so that we can engage in the conversation. And I don't know the answer yet because I haven't seen what the subgroup is doing in terms of.
By the way, the ultracapacitors will be a white paper from the electric sub-team.
You know, I guess the way I'd say it from an application standpoint, they always look interesting. We always feel like there's an application for them. And there are a few places where they have been successful, buses, garbage truck type applications, things that have very high power throughput characteristics, high power transients, short transients. You know, there does seem to be applications for them. It's always been a challenge to really get them fully to the final product in a cost-effective way, I think is the final answer. They just haven't made it into the OEM space.
Okay, we can take two more questions. So I think you have the microphone back there. Right, you?
Bengt Halverson with Green Car Reports. So outside of personal convenience and a few novel corridors that I'm aware of, do any of you have, could any of you point us to actual number projections for the positive economic impact of level 3 charging stations, of level 3 chargers?
The positive economic value, meaning how much value does it create for the consumer?
Mm-hmm. We've discussed in detail the projected costs of installing them.
So you want to know the business model that says it'll be successful?
Yeah, going out to 2050 or so, are there any numbers projecting the positive economic impact of level 3 charging?
The value of level 3 charging is not corridors. It is not to move you across from Chicago to St. Louis to Florida or wherever you want. It's not to drive across the country. The value of fast charging infrastructure is in a urban area to extend your normal operation. So normally you're going to tie your vehicle to your normal driving behaviors. When you need to go outside of that to go to the music lessons, to go pick up your kids or whatever, that's not your normal route. That's where the fast charger distributed around in a circle, around an urban area, makes the EV, the small city EV, the most practical vehicle to cover not only the 50 miles, but the 150 miles you might need to cover some once a month, once every week kind of route. That doing fast charging on a long distance route is it extends your driving time. It extends the dwell times that you sit in between things to a level that doesn't make sense anymore.
Is there anyone kind of studying those small differences and the economic impact they might make?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Just anticipating that someone along the line is going to want to know.
Another
this
study.
I think we're getting close. I think we're
Another
getting close to
study.
that. Yes, the infrastructure planning efforts is really there is a DOE, Department of Energy Clean Cities program that is going to focus on helping cities figure out how to plan out infrastructure in the near future. And so that, those types of things about where should level 2, where should level 3, where should home infrastructure be, and how does it get spread around the system in an intelligent way is an important step.
Okay,
The-
we
the
got
only-
one last question
Yep.
from Dan Cooper.
Just kind of a follow-up to what you're just saying. I've heard from like some EV enthusiasts, like Chelsea Sexton, for example, who is saying that like public chargers are already being installed at too high of a rate to actually ever be utilized at any sort of percentage or useful percentage. Is that within the scope of your study? And if so, do you have any conclusions yet on that?
Well, the question you're asking about is are they being installed at too high a rate? I don't believe that we're going to get to that level of analysis. Our study will probably stay within the confines of what would be needed and what to enable the accelerated path, but we won't talk about, let's say, overextensions. I doubt if we'll get that far. It remains to be seen, but I doubt if we'll get that far.
Well, have you looked at data to see, whether the average EV driver will need a charger outside of their home X number of days a month?
To the extent that there are studies available, the answer is yes. We certainly consider the different, I hate to use the word speculation, people's considerations of what they think that would look like, and so that we can do the calculations and the analysis of what kind of infrastructure would be needed.
I think you have to look at the regional characteristics. A place like San Francisco, where not many people have a permanent parking spot for their vehicle, you got to flip that around and not think about home. You got to think about workplace. Home and workplace need to be the priority areas for charging infrastructure. Public is an added value to bring perception that things are happening.
This is to the whole panel. The idea of intelligent charging has been brought up quite a bit in your panel. And of course, that's going to mean different things in different regions. And of course, the flip side of that is selfish charging, which we all have a cell phone mentality where the first thing we do is we look for an outlet. In Southern California, where a lot of these vehicles are going to be targeted, it is very common to have high commute mileage. And in order to make this technology attractive and saleable in volume, you're probably going to be attracting people who are going to want to take advantage, for example, of charging during the day while they're at work. And in a large area like LA, that could be a very large number. So I'm just curious in your modeling how that kind of regional intelligent charging comes into play compared to other regions, because it seems like in that kind of concentrated volume, the definition would change.
The definition of intelligent.
That there could be variable definitions of what is intelligent charging, and that probably in LA you're going to run into much more selfish charging, where there would be a high use of chargers during the day.
So in the case of the National Petroleum Council study, talking about consumer behaviors beyond the skill sets of, you saw that we're mainly a technology-oriented policy economic analysis group, and so that would be beyond the scope, although we certainly would consider that it's a variable that has to be understood. It's beyond It's not the expertise that we staff for, nor the question that we were being asked. Consumer behavior is difficult. There are people and academics that specialize in that.
Yeah, I think some of the work that CU's doing with the plug-in hybrid demo fleet, I think is going to be insightful in terms of demographics and tying that to behavioral type things. We do have differentiated driving type data for different regions of the country. So we do understand how the driving patterns change. We've never tried to implement the demographic behavioral aspect of that on top of the charging behavior, which it's a pretty interesting, complex scenario that could be modeled.
John, we're at the beginning of the learning curve on that. There's a lot of questions like you have that we need to learn about.
Well, it is a great time in that we are able to actually collect data now on what people are actually doing instead of researching what people think they will do. So this is a new time for all of us. I think it's pretty exciting, and we'll be learning a lot. I would really like to thank Jan, not only for filling in for JC, who is sick, but providing the outstanding research and his knowledge with us today.
I always
Tony?
like to speak to this group, Mary. Thanks.
Oh, good. Tony, thank you so much for joining us. Your insight on how the comfort levels and its impacts on people when they're driving plug-ins and plug-in, I shouldn't be plugging our own, but plug-in Priuses or plug-in and battery electric vehicles is very insightful, and we get often a lot of questions on how that impacts the range of vehicles when we're out there talking to consumers, and they are aware that that's going to have an impact. So I think that your studies will resonate well with a lot of the things that we're learning about these vehicles. And Linda, thank you so much for being here and sharing the research and the effort and leading that effort on the NPC group. I think all the enthusiasts in this audience really appreciate that. So thank you all so much for participating today.